And I think a lot of what the problem is right now, and I think I posted something about this over like, there's too much of this over sanitizing, like we can't take risk and everything has to be really good for us. But this, the only way to build muscle, to build resilience is to break things down, is to push yourself, is to feel pain sometimes and then get through it and then become stronger. And so like this idea of, keeping people in bubbles and never like exposing them to germs where it weakens the immune system is crazy to me. It's like, we got to stop doing that. And we have to, stay positive, but also accept the challenges, right? Bring them on. Don't shy away from them. And again, I feel like as an athlete, you're talking about a routine that's really strict and that most people don't do, where they have to wake up, train, do all this positivity on the way over. Like most people are listening to the news and like eating a donut in the morning and getting negative and putting negative things in them. And then that's their negative habit. And that's why I feel like you have a disease population in a sense where 60% or more are chronically ill. I mean, that's what kind of sucks, is that people sometimes look at what you and I say. They're just like, oh, that's like that far out stuff there. Then I just don't get it. But I think, when you really break it down, I love talking to you about this because it isn't. It's not like we're some out there kind of people and like, going around hugging trees. Like I love trees, but I don't usually hug them. Like,
Yeah. And I don't know if it was, was this our default? I mean, I know you had your dad, but like, I feel like for me to get to this place, it was about balance. Like I didn't get to this. This was not my default. I had a lot of weird times, where, and I still do push through really hard times. And if I didn't have like that experience, I wouldn't get to the more positivity. I wanted to bring one more name into this that was interesting. One of my best friends, smart guy. He went to Harvard. He's a hockey player. He's going to Denver now because he had one more year for transferring for the COVID year. He's my best friend. Like I said, really smart. He's into this guy. His name is like Alo Trivedi or something like that. His whole thing is like Dr. Rewire. And it's all about like the neurology of whatever. Same stuff. Everyone's saying the same thing kind of, but I really liked what he said. He was just talking about how like we are wired for survival. Like I feel like a lot of people have like maybe a negativity bias, but he's like, that's correct. Like we, as hunters and gatherers back in the day, like if we didn't survive, like if we weren't wired for like looking at the negativity or like what's around us, like we wouldn't survive. So I feel like I kind of like started to get to these concepts because training, like as an athlete, like someone's always working harder. So there's been times like I'm always grinding, like I'm always doing those things, and you're nervous that you're not going to succeed. And if I don't have that positivity or some of that brainwashing everywhere, like, I mean, that's just so much on one side of the coin. Like, I feel like how is that? How do people look at it as that crazy stuff? Because if you don't have that balance, like, I think, well, that just goes to what you talk about. Like, that's how disease starts. If there's no balance, like, it's a tough place to be.
No, and I'm glad you brought it up because, a lot of us think that we are wired like differently, or we are wired for like being healthier or something like that. It's like, I always bring up the story. It's like, I was born with a ventricular heart defect, right? Like a large one. Like that ain't lucky, right? Like I was literally born with a defect that the doctors said, well, he might not be able to play sports at all or run or do things that are strenuous. My parents were scared by that. They never told me. They just kept me as healthy as possible and said, you could do everything, like, right, run, do this. Yeah. So luckily, by the time I was 7, I got old. But it's like, I don't believe in luck in this stuff, or like that you're just given the bad genes and that's it. And you just got to fall victim to them. And you do have to work hard to rewire, but it's all worth it. And, even to your point, like I still get emails like everyone else does, and they still trigger me. It's not like I'm sitting there and being like, oh, someone's leaving the company that I really, needed at this time, and I'm happy about it. Yeah, no, I'm going to use positivity and
I am abundant.
Right. Yeah. No, like I get pissed off. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. But I stop myself quickly. I have the stressor response, that autonomic, like, sympathetic response of flight, basically, or getting angry. Sure. And then I try to use techniques I know to spin them. So for that, I'm insanely grateful for the techniques, but I'm not insanely grateful for how I'm wired or my genetics in a sense, because they kind of lead me into that, quick reaction that I'm fighting like a lion right now or something. Yeah. And the stress response and the cortisol and the, all of that. But I could quickly change that. I quickly find myself breathing right. And listen, that took years of like therapy and learning and techniques. So it's not easy, right? It's a process, like you say, forever, but it's one worth it, I think.
I mean, to make it a little bit simpler for me, just like at the end of the day, like we all kind of around people. And yeah, we're not trying to be like in the clouds, but it's nicer to be around someone who has a nicer vibe and is looking more on the positive. It can be really draining to look that way. And I think that anyone that really dives into anyone's story, like you said, your heart thing. And I remember I've read so many books, I can't remember all of them, but I was reading your father's book and just about his journey when he was going traveling and different things. He didn't even know what was going on, but you just like, everyone has this journey of like confusion, maybe some darkness, or like, and that's kind of ultimately how you get to maybe more of this positivity. Like people have had some tough times. I feel like that's what makes you guys and so many people cool, is that like you got through the hard part, you never quit, and you keep going. Not that there's not going to be more hard parts, but that's kind of like, that's like the groundedness. Like we all have those dark places. And so let's use that. And that can be a default at times, but then we kind of like balance it out with the other side. I feel like I'm saying the same thing, but I think that's why I respect you guys. Like you had some tough parts and you could have stayed in that negativity, but ultimately you chose to be more positive, and look what you guys have created. Like you just kept going. And I feel like that's the principle. As long as you don't quit, like cool things happen.
It's so true that, all of us have shit in our lives.